As I keep saying, I'm not necessarily dogmatic about how I do things when it comes to testing, but I do really like BDD, or behavior-driven design, especially when you're putting together process-oriented code. So in this case, I need to create the review process for when an application comes in and somebody, or in this case, our application, reviews it to make sure that everything is okay. This is typically a stepwise process with lots of steps involved, and that can lead to some really ugly Christmas tree code. So what I like to do is use Node's event emitter in a structure that you see here. I require the emitter, and then I inherit the emitter down below with Node's util library. The next thing I do is I write myself some comments inside of the class itself and what I expect to happen. Here I need to make sure the app is valid. I need to find the next mission for the person who's applying. I need to make sure that the role that they have selected is available and height weight is right for that role. And I need to accept the app with a nice message or deny the app with a nice message. I know that each step in this process could change, and I might be adding steps, which is likely, and I will probably be taking them away. So while I'm here, I'm just going to code it. Why not? And this is kind of breaking the dogmatic TDD or BDD way of doing things, but I'm here, and it's easy to write. So for this, I'm just going to emit that the application is validated. This is going to fire Node's event emitter and pass along the app variable. If it's not valid, it's going to emit the invalid event, and it's going to just pass along a message saying there's a problem with this application. Simple enough. However, it would be nice to know what's going wrong here with the application, so while I'm thinking about it, might as well do it. So this .validation message, this is going to just interrogate the application itself, and it's going to figure out what's going wrong. And if it's valid, then I'm going to say it's valid. Otherwise, I'm going to ask each one of the validation methods, hey, are you the one that's false? And, well, you get the idea. I'll just return an individualized message. This is going to allow me to use this in my tests. Hooray, look at that. Nice and clear. All right. Well, heading back over to review.js, instead of just saying there's something wrong, I can now call this .validation message. And moving along, so for find the next mission, I don't really know what I'm going to be doing here. So let's just stub this thing out. And what I'll do is I will just create an object that represents what I think a mission will be. And we'll have a commander, a pilot, an MAV pilot, and some passengers. And so for now, let's just emit that the mission has been selected. And again, I'll pass along the app. All right, well, moving along here, we need to make sure that the role is available. And again, why not just stub it out? That's what I'm going to do. And I have no idea what is going to happen about a role, or I don't know, how to select one. So I need more info from the client. So for this case, I am simply going to emit that the role is available. And as far as height, weight, age, and being right for the role, well, can you guess what I'm going to do here? I have no idea. And you might be thinking, dude, what are you doing? You're writing a bunch of functions that aren't really doing anything. And yes, you are correct. That's okay. To me, this is part of the design process, the thinking process. Not only is it important to get the real code out there, but it's also important to think about how it's all going to go together. In this case, I know I have to do these things above, and I know that eventually I'm either going to accept or deny the application. So I might as well just get it on down and make sure that what I'm thinking here in terms of how this is all going to go together will actually work. All right, well, we have the midpoints and the endpoints of our process. We also need the place where it's going to start, and that will be process application. And once this happens, I'm going to emit an event, basically saying the application was received. Here, I'll take a callback as well next. And that is something I'm going to need to remember because I am writing things in an event-based way inside of here, but I'm going to need to make sure that I have a way to call back code later on. So to do this, what I'm going to do is inside this review process instance, I'm going to create a callback variable. And then down below here, I am going to set that callback variable equal to next. There you go. And I should point out here that that should be one line above. Line 53 should actually be on line 52. That'll cause an error. I'll fix this later on. So what I'm going to do with that callback is I'm going to actually use it if the application is accepted. If it is accepted, I am going to return an object that has success true and the message that you see here. And again, with deny application, I'll do the same thing. I'm going to call back. I'm not going to pass along an error. I'm going to call back a data object that says success is false. And I'm going to give a message. Where does that message come from? Well, it is passed into the deny application function. Okay, what am I doing here? You might be thinking, Rob, have you lost your mind? You haven't really written any code. Well, what you might be sensing here is that I have a bit of a harness going on. Since I'm using Node's event emitter, it's really important to me that I wire it together correctly. In other words, this is kind of structure and glue that I'm putting together right now. And I have found that it is much easier to make sure that you get this event chain done correctly before you have any code in here. Okay, so what does that even mean? Well, let's take a look at this. This is our event path or our event chain. When the process application method is called, it's going to emit an event called application received. When that event goes off, that is going to fire a method called ensure app valid. When that happens successfully, the validated event is going to fire, and then that's going to call find next mission. And if the next mission is found, well, you get the idea. That is our event path. Well, what if things go wrong? If any of these methods has a problem, it's going to emit the invalid event, and it's going to pass along a message. And that is our sad path down below. This code looks good to me, and when I run my first test, it should all pass, which is exactly what I want. If it doesn't pass or I have trouble, it's going to be specifically because my event chain here isn't put together the right way, and I'll need to know that up front. Speaking of, let's write some specs here and see if we can get this thing to work as we intend. So in our review spec here, I will do what I have done for every one of our test files, and I will use Node's assert library. I'll pull in the review process module that I just created, and also our membership application. Here, I'm going to describe the review process. That is our application feature. Simple enough. The next thing I want to describe is something basic and simple. What happens when we receive a valid application? Well, the next thing I need to do is create my before block, as you've seen me do. And inside the before block, I am going to create a valid app. And for that, I'll borrow some code from our membership application tests. Here, I'm going to do something a little bit different. Here, I am passing in done to the callback for our before function. That is going to mark this as an asynchronous test. This test needs to be asynchronous because it's going to be working with asynchronous code. Specifically, when I call process application, it expects a callback. When that callback comes back, I'm going to want to fire done so I can tell Mocha that I am done with this before process. Let's just see how it works. Here, I'm going to create a new instance of the review process, and then I'm going to call process application, sending in our valid app. Then I'm going to expect back some error or a result, hopefully a result, and then I'm going to set my decision variable to that result. And finally, I'm going to call done. Once done is called, Mocha will continue with execution of our tests. Speaking of, what tests are we even going to run? Well, let's start with the most basic one. I mentioned before, I just want to test to make sure that we have a successful return. This is going to tell me that I've put together the event emitter stuff in the right way. So I'm just going to assert decision.success, and if it doesn't happen right, I'll have a look at the returned message. Okay, well, I'm almost done. I just got to be sure that that review process, there we go, instantiation happens inside the before block, not outside of it. That would make everything crash. That would not be good. So let's do a quick review here. I have a feature above, the review process. This is a feature of my application. Underneath that, I am describing a scenario, which is receiving a valid application. I am constructing that scenario in the before block, and the representation of this scenario is kept in my decision variable right there. And then down below, I am specifying what the behavior of the application should be using assertions. Look at that. I did it right the first time. Oh, that's no fun. I was hoping for something to go wrong so I could troubleshoot it. All right. Well, our event chain is working nicely, and we have our scenario put together. Let's move on and see if we can break things.